Well, hi, everyone, and welcome on into another edition of Navigating Trump 2.0. This is the show that takes a look at the week that was in Washington, D.C. through the lens of the second Trump administration. And joining me is CBN News chief political analyst David Brody and Dan Andros, host of CBN's Quick Start podcast. Gentlemen, let's start with Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth at the center of attention all week long. Of course, mixed up and at the center of this growing controversy regarding the Pentagon's use of military strikes against suspected drug smuggling vessels in the Caribbean and in some other locations as well. But we're specifically looking this week at a strike that took place on September 2nd, in which the U.S. military carried out what people are calling a double tap attack on this vessel coming out of Venezuela that was suspected to be carrying drugs, presumably being smuggled to the United States. At the beginning of the week, Defense Secretary Hegseth was responding to a Washington Post story that claimed Hegseth told the Navy to, quote, kill them all. When it was found that there were survivors from the initial attack. During the course of the week, he claimed on Monday that was fake news. And then during the course of the week, the message kind of evolved to saying, well, they were justified in doing what they were doing. That was the argument that was made by Navy Admiral Frank Bradley to lawmakers when he went before them in closed sessions on Thursday. He told a bipartisan group of lawmakers in the Senate and in the House that he ordered the so-called double tap strike and contradicted the Washington Post report that Hegseth said, quote, kill them all. The reaction to the admiral's testimony was different based on who you talked to, which side of the aisle they were on, Republican or Democrat. Republican Tom Cotton defended the decision to order a second strike. He said everything was handled legally and correctly. He said the two survivors, and Admiral Bradley said that the two survivors on the boat were actively trying to re-engage, get the boat flipped over and to restart the vessel. Democrats saw the video of the incident much differently, stopping short of calling it a war crime, but blasting Hegseth for violating military operating procedures and norms. So, David, after a week of this, where we've seen this story take a number of twists and turns, and certainly Pete Hegseth is in the crosshairs right now, so to speak, metaphorically speaking, with regard to this incident, as well as another incident we're going to touch on in just a second. What are you hearing first about lawmaker reaction to this closed-door briefing from Admiral Bradley?
Well, on the Republican side, the lawmaker reaction has been pretty much what you would expect, which is that, they're backing Hegseth overall and they're backing Trump, though the caveat is we need a full hearing, we need more information, we need to keep on exploring what really happened, and that's fair. To me, guys, we're all sports nuts, and I remember Warner Wolf in New York City, he's a famous sportscaster, said, let's go to the videotape. And I kind of think that's where we are. We're under video review, if you will, if it was an NFL game. And we're going to the video and seeing what it shows. And of course, John, as you mentioned, you're going to get, it's like two different officials, if you will. One sees it one way and one sees it another. Hey, New York, you got to get your act together, so to speak, in the video review booth. So look, it depends what in the fight means, right? Ultimately there seems to be a lot of jurisdiction, or what's the word I'm really looking for? Just kind of like, I'm trying to think of the word. When you're not quite sure if it is or it isn't, there's a lot of leeway. Thank you. I just complimented myself. Leeway. Leeway. And so I think that's what the administration is, in essence, saying here. They're saying, look, these two guys on the boat were still engaged in the fight. Really? Okay. Well, how do we know that? Well, the Democrats are like, you don't know that, and you shouldn't have killed them. And the Republicans are like, no, they were engaged in the fight because they were trying to save the drugs. Well, how do you know that? Well, rules of war, fog of war, and here we go. And so I just think the whole thing isn't really going to ultimately get resolved. And this is your quintessential Washington, D.C. controversy that, quite frankly, guys, and Dan, I'm curious to get your opinion on this, but it starts as a Washington, remember, this whole thing started as a Washington Post story that in essence has been debunked, at least the part about Hegseth saying kill them all. And that seemed to suggest the kill them all was part of the second strike. But really, it seems now that if he even did indeed say that, that would have been before even the first strike, and then it was left open to interpretation as to what to do afterwards. So it's not as clear cut. So that Washington Post story seemed a bit debunked. My point is that this feels very, I hate to use the word, but I'll use it, kind of deep state-ish. There's a lot of folks within the Pentagon and other places in DC that want to see Hegseth gone, and you know that they were leaking this stuff to try to do exactly that. I think that's a big part of this.
Yeah. I mean, I'll just respond to that, David. I mean, I think it's interesting when the New York Times, who's not exactly the Pete Hegseth fan club, they come to the defense here and debunk this thing, at least, like you said, that part of it. And, it sure seems like there's something at play here with that target, because the real question here is, to me, the whole second strike thing is like kind of like a manufactured sort of narrative, because the real debate is, should we be doing this or not, right? Like, because if you're trying to blow up a ship, and that's they're trying to bring drugs in, and your goal is to stop those drugs, and so you're willing to use lethal force to do that, I don't know that a second, like, what are we like? Oh, the first strike on the guy sitting in the boat was fine, but then the second one, now that's just really bad. You guys have jumped the shark. Like, to me, the debate shouldn't be like the second strike thing. It should just be, should we be doing this or not? Because if you're willing to drop a bomb on them or a rocket on them on one shot, like, what's the difference with the second shot? And I get that. You don't want to just be like, I guess I can't even say it, because you're like, well, you don't want to just execute people. Well, you're executing the first people. So, I mean, it's the same thing. Like, I don't really see a difference between that. So to me, it feels a bit manufactured.
Yeah, I think that's, I mean, so the people who are focusing on the second strike, they're admittedly saying, let's put to the side for the moment whether or not these attacks are legitimate or not, whether we really are at war here, or whether we are using the military to conduct criminal operations and carry out attacks that under normal circumstances would have been carried out through arrests and the seizure of the boats and the seizure of the drugs, and instead of a military attack here. And I think that's a conversation certainly that everyone is having, and that it continues to have, and this is going to work. That's going to work its way through the courts, whether or not the rationalization of using methods of war fighting are appropriate in this situation, in a way in which we've never fought this war against narco-terrorists or drug smugglers before. But if you grant them that premise that we are at war here, and that they have the legal right to act in a warlike way, then the second strike comes into play. And if you want to take the Trump administration at their word, they're saying they're at war. They're saying they have the legal recourse to conduct these strikes this way. So then, okay, then we have to go based on that. If that's true, then are you conducting this war in a humane way? And I'll just point to what the Department of Defense Law of War Manual explains with regard specifically to shipwrecked people. It says, shipwrecked combatants include those who have been shipwrecked from any cause. Persons who have been incapacitated by shipwreck are in a helpless state, and it would be dishonorable and inhumane to make them the object of attack. In order to receive protection as hors de combat, the person must be wholly disabled from fighting. And I think, David, to your point, that's what the video should be able to show us. It sounds like some of the lawmakers have seen the video, the second strike, and they come out of looking at it differently. Tom Cotton seemed to come out of looking at that video saying, I see nothing wrong here. The Democrats certainly saying they see a lot wrong here with the second strike. And if it can be shown that these two shipwrecked people were just holding on to the boat for dear life and they went after him and attacked him again, then according to the military's, the Department of Defense's own law of a war manual, the military conducted and I don't know if I don't think you could call it necessarily a war crime just based off of that, but certainly it went against what the military's normal regulations would be in terms of the rules of engagement here. So any thoughts on that, guys?
I don't think we're going to have any answers. That's the thing. Because there's a key word. I said leeway before. I think I figured out a better word: latitude.
Yeah.
The latitude that military commanders have in that moment to determine intent and what was going on. I mean, how are you going to prove it otherwise? So I don't think you are. And so I think this is ultimately going to just be a wash I know that doesn't satisfy the Democrats, but I think that's going to happen. And by the way, I'm smelling something. Do you guys smell that? It's Democrat hypocrisy. We have smell-o-vision, I believe, on our television, and you can smell the hypocrisy by Democrats on this. What do I mean by that? Can we go back to Obama? Do we all remember the drone strikes by President Obama and his administration, right? They were literally doing drone strikes, but they called signature strikes at the time. In other words, the signature strikes that they were doing into Pakistan, into Yemen, and other places, they were literally taking drones. And the reason they called it a signature strike is because they would identify, if you will, a group of people. If you were military age, you were a man, and you were in some sort of nefarious area that the United States, believed to be, a problem, a hotbed of activity, you were fair game. And indeed, that's exactly what happened. And there's quite a few instances, but I can give you one that happened in Pakistan where 40 civilians were killed. They were not enemy combatants at all. They were civilians. They had gathered in this area that was a nefarious area. They were men. They were of military age, and they were all killed, but they had nothing to do with terrorism. And this happened under Obama.
Yeah.
Where were the Democrats? Where were the Democrats? And I looked it up, and it wasn't just ChatGPT, FYI. I actually did a deep dive on this, and the only Democrat to speak up at the time, for the most part, was forgot his name now, Adam Schiff. Thank you. Once again, I'm thanking myself. Adam Schiff. So the point is that, Crimea River Democrats, that you've got a problem with this when Obama was doing drone strikes. And oh, by the way, can we talk about Joe Biden? Look it up. It's right there, everybody. This is not a fake video. 1989, Joe Biden, 1989, talking about, this was at the time that George W. Bush was going after narco-terrorists. And it was Joe Biden who was leading the charge to say, hey, we have to take the war on drugs to the narco-terrorists and actually go to where they live. I mean, guys, come on. I mean,
listen,
go ahead.
We have drugs that, let's just look at this from like the optics level, right? Like, okay, there are going to be these legal arguments, like what are we allowed to do? What was wrong or right with this strike? But the goal here is to stop these drugs from coming into this country. And I can guarantee you, there are narco-terrorists who are very much thinking twice about getting into a boat and just going across the waters here and just trying their luck. Because this is clearly the reason they're showing all these is not for us to sit there and go, yay, look at it's for the narco-terrorists to go, oh my gosh, we are getting blown out of the water. And then on the optics level, the Democrats here, once again, are putting them in a spot where they are having to defend narco-terrorists, right?
That's right.
And so, we can have this legal discussion on it, and where the chips fall on that, let them fall. But at the end of the day, Democrats, who was the guy that they, the gang member that they,
Brago Garcia, the
they're
Maryland
going to have
man.
lunch with this guy down in there. And I saw news reports calling these shipwrecked sailors on this. They're not sailors. They're not just guys out there holding the mast and like kind of looking up and soaking in the breeze. Like, they're trafficking narcotics. I mean, this is what they're doing. So yeah.
Or are they? And I think that's the big question.
Well,
If they're not, that's a problem.
Well, and that's the devil's advocate situation here, where obviously they're going based off of intelligence of what they know, what they believe they know are on these boats, who these people are. The arguments against using the military in this way, and the arguments in favor of pursuing this in the way that you would a criminal enterprise, is you don't know for sure that the people who are doing the smuggling on this boat aren't being forced into it, right? You could have a situation where, and these are just hypotheticals, but you could have a situation where cartels are forcing these people to do this work. And so you've got people caught in the middle. Say, families are being held hostage, or they're being threatened with their lives, or whatever it might be. That's the first argument. The second argument is, how do you know that these ships are heading towards the United States and not someplace else? That's the argument that Rand Paul has been making, and he's been one of the Republicans that has been against this, the operation from the start. There's just a lot you don't know. You don't do we know that that there are drugs on these ships? Probably yes. We're assuming that we do know that, and if you do know that, fine. But there's lots of other things you don't know. And then the other thing is, what does this mean in terms of U.S. ships on the high seas in international waters? Let's just say there's a country that is suspecting or intelligence that we are carrying something nefarious on a ship to somewhere. What's to stop that country from firing on an American ship, saying, well, we believe the United States was carrying such and such, and they were heading towards us to do this. It's just the argument against using the military in this way is that it opens a door. And isn't this some of the things we talk about all the time? Like, it opens the door to the possibilities of perhaps this coming back to haunt the United States at some point.
Well, just to pick up on the last point, if they were to ever attack a United States ship and sink a ship or kill sailors, whatever it is, then they can kiss their country goodbye.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that'll be the end. And do they really want to risk that? I mean, you're really going to try and go after a United States vessel in the open seas with Donald Trump as president? Yeah. Well, see how that works out. No. See how that works out for you.
It's not a good idea. David, one last thing on Hegseth here. The Pentagon this week, their inspector general released a report that was a long-awaited report on the Signalgate scandal from the very beginning of the Trump administration, where they reported out that Hegseth's use of the Signal app to talk about war plans when the United States was bombing a Yemeni base because of the Houthi rebels when they were attacking ships at sea as retaliation for that Hegseth talking about the war plans with other administration members. His wife was a part of this, and famously the editor of The Atlantic, that it did not comply with Pentagon protocols. And this is just bringing this up at the same time as Hegseth is dealing with the fallout of the Venezuela boat attacks right now. So, I mean, at the end of the day, David, with the Signalgate and the Venezuela boats, is Pete Hegseth in trouble? Like, what is your read on how much rope he has left with the administration, with Republicans on Capitol Hill? It feels like, and you never know how much of this is just media push and how much of it is in reality he's in trouble.
Well, Trump and Hegseth are close, and Trump is loyal, and my sense is that he's going to be okay. Having said that, there is the old how much water can actually get in the boat before it sinks. And, you have the Signalgate thing, you had this potentially, or at least it's a distraction, if you want to call it that, to the administration. And so, I do think there is that aspect to it. I mean, and at that point, when it starts to, kind of go overboard, literally go overboard with too much water, then you might have to cut them loose. But I think, as you mentioned on Capitol Hill, I think that's going to be the key. When you have senators, not so much congressmen in the House, but when you have senators going to President Trump saying, look, we've seen the video. We really know what's going on. He really should not have done what he did, X, Y, and Z, whatever it is. Then I think there'll be internal pressure to get rid of him. But I don't see it at this point. And MAGA is still with him. And, Trump is still trying to channel his MAGA base, which is a conversation for a separate podcast at this point, or podcast episode. But I personally think that Hegseth will be fine. I think if anybody's going to be the first to go in the administration, it'll be Pam Bondi.
Oh, okay. Any sense on why or when?
I think it could be a couple months, maybe by the end of the year, maybe over Christmas, maybe by, in sometime in January. If you go back on this, on Navigating Trump 2.0, I did say that about, I want to say 3 or 4 months ago, and I still hold true to that. I think she'll be the one to go. Once again, I might have the timing wrong, but I think it'll be sooner rather than later.
Will she get a graceful exit, or will they give her an out to just say she's stepping down, or are they just gonna? Is it going to be sort of a? No,
I think it'll be graceful. They'll give her a cottage in the countryside. No, just kidding. I'm sorry, that was terrible. But you know what I'm trying to say.
Nice spot on Fox News, right, or Newsmax, or wherever it is she wants to go.
Yeah.
Let's transition. I want to talk a little bit about some of the Trump approval numbers that are out there right now. Averages based on Real Clear Politics and New York Times. It's always best to kind of not look at one single poll, but trends over a long period of time. And Real Clear Politics and the New York Times do a good job of just kind of encapsulating all of the polls that are out there and coming up with averages. At the start of the administration with Real Clear Politics, he was at 50.5% approval. Let's see, it was on April 29th, it was down to 45.1%. That was around the 100-day mark for the president. It was 42.3% on November 14th. That's when the Jeffrey Epstein stuff was really hitting its fever pitch. And as of December 4th, which would have been Thursday of this week, Real Clear Politics had a roundup of 42.4% approval, 54.9% disapproval. According to the New York Times, their aggregator showed Trump's approval fell from 52% approval in January to 44% in April. They also have it down to 42% and 55% disapproval, according to the New York Times. So, Dan, let me start this off with you. I think we see this with most administrations, that as the administration, as you know, there's a lot of idealism and optimism by supporters and the independents and the people who voted for that particular president. They just voted him into office, so there's nothing really to disapprove at that point. No one's done anything. And so the approval is always going to be highest at the start of an administration. And then as things are happening, things go well, things go wrong, the numbers more than likely, unless you have, like George W. Bush had, the war on terror, where everybody galvanizes together and supports the president, generally speaking, you see numbers sag. Have the Trump numbers sagged to a worrisome level in your eyes, or is this just kind of like, hey, we're a year in, it's not that unusual, still time to turn it around. There are things for the Trump administration to feel good about as the midterms are getting ever closer?
Yeah, I don't think, I mean, if we're just solely focused on midterms, because obviously, you know, Trump, this is his, in theory, maybe not according to Steve Bannon, but in theory, this is his last go around. But as far as the midterms go, I don't think it's like time to panic just yet. But I do think there are concerns, particularly with the economy. And I don't know that the economy is as strong as he's trying to say it is. He's talking about all the tariff revenues that are coming in, and those are essentially just taxes that the American people pay because, you know, you charge these tariffs on stuff coming in and they just charge more for it. Then the ones importing it charge more for it, and then we pay more for it. So there are things that are troubling underneath the surface here that I think maybe don't quite add up to talking about how wonderful the economy is all the time. But that said, I don't think it's yet to a super worrisome point for Republicans. I mean, David, I'd like to hear your temperature on that, but I think my assessment would be there are some concerns, but it's not reached panic level yet.
Yeah, I mean, I think I track with that, though I would say that I think it's actually a little bit more dangerous than that, because, and once again, to be clear, I have never been a big fan of, polls in terms of a snapshot in time, right? Give me a break. And don't get me started on the methodology. Then I start to geek out and I'm like, you got to be kidding me. You got to look at the sample size. You got to look at, everything. So, but having said that, you look at poll after poll after poll after poll, there is a trend. And if you look at the positive Trump polls, the Rasmussen reports, those type of polls, those numbers are down too. So that's problematic for him. And why is that? Well, Dan, you're right. It's the economy, or as Carville would say, James Carville, right? It's the economy, stupid. Because ultimately, and I'm not calling either one of you stupid, by the way, but that's the issue, right? I mean, the Democrats have seized on affordability, and there's a point to be made there. Now, if Trump has called it a con job, and I'll get to that in a second, but let me just say that, let me get to the con job part of it now, because it interrelates to everything, which is this. If you look at the actual data, this is not, this is data from the Heritage Foundation, but it tracks, they're just quoting some of the government numbers. Under Joe Biden, real wages, so real wages are considered, instead of just like what your paycheck is, it's like real wages means when you factor in what the purchasing power of those wages are. They were down 4% overall during the Biden administration. So you had 4% less purchasing power, if you will, from a wage perspective. Under Trump, that number of minus 4% is now at minus 3%. So it has increased 1%, but it's still minus 3%. So that's why the affordability issue is still an issue. But what the Trump folks are saying is, hey, give us time, we're making progress. And you can say that is true technically, but 1%, are people going to really see 1%? Not yet. So I think it comes down to quarter one and quarter two, right? We've heard Scott Bessent talk about this over and over again, and Lutnick as well, say, wait, give us till the end of quarter one, give us to the end of quarter two, and the big, beautiful bill, which is now the big, beautiful law, no tax on tips, no tax on overtime, all this. It's all going to come to fruition, and wait till you see the GDP growth. Well, you know what? It's GDP growth or bust for the Trump administration, because they have to deliver. So what is the end of quarter two? Is that going to be June and June 30th, I think? I think by then, I think so. Anyhow.
Yeah, June. I just had to do it in my head. Yeah, I was running through the number, January, February, March.
June.
Yeah. Yeah.
So think about it. Let's have a Navigating Trump 2026. I'm sorry, what am I trying to say? Navigating Trump 2.0 in 2026 on July 1st and see where we're at exactly. Because not only will I have a better sense of the economic condition of the country, but that will come just a few months before the midterms. And I think we'll have a better sense of it then. But the con job part of it, when he mentioned that at the cabinet meeting this week, saying it's a con job by the Democrats. What he's saying is the numbers that I just said, which is like it's actually improving, affordability is improving, but the Democrats messed it up, so to speak, during the Biden administration. They messed it up so much that we're recovering from that. So don't blame us for affordability when we've seen a +1% growth or you know, a +1 affordability, and we're working on it. So that's the con job part of it.
Yeah, but I'll tell you what, I remember when we were together over the course of the summer for the general election, and the Biden administration and the campaign was talking about good job growth numbers and all these other numbers, and trying to convince the American people the economy was doing better than it felt like it was doing for them. And it most likely the messaging cost them the election because prices were still high. And I think we've said, yeah, go ahead, David.
I was going to say, but the difference is that back then inflation was higher than it was today.
Yeah.
Number one. And number two, even though I think at the time we talked, inflation was coming down, it was still high. So it wasn't that 9% inflation number, but it was, what was it, 4 or 5%? I don't know. It's less today. So that's something, but I get your point, John. I take your point, which is like, if you don't feel it, then don't quote me a PDF document on GDP growth. I got you.
Right, and that was my only thing with the messaging of calling affordability.
It didn't line up. It didn't line up with reality.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah, and so when you call affordability a con job, the average American who is looking at a grocery bill that is higher than it's been, or that's still too high, it's like, the heck it is a con job. I can't afford to save anything. I can't afford to go on a vacation next year, or I can't afford to, you know, if you're lower income, I can't afford to, you know, pay for medicine and food. So I mean, those problems have always been there, but you know, again, if it's the messaging to kind of relate to the everyday person, like we know what you're going through, you know, and talking about a 1% growth in actual wages it's right. It is 100% correct. But with the midterms coming up, it's a delicate dance.
Can I just say one last thing though? Just to be clear, I mean, egg prices are down, milk is down, gas is down. There are certain things that are actually down from the Biden administration. So number one, and number two, what the administration is trying to do is say, okay, we're going to have to hold off on some of these tariffs as it relates to beef and some other products. So I mean, I think they understand that people need to feel it, and if people don't feel it, then it will be a problem.
Absolutely. One other thing about the midterms, and that is that there was a couple of different reports out this week. I think Politico had it. I think Punchbowl, that there could be a big wave of sitting Republican members of Congress who are going to leave before their term is up, much in the same way Marjorie Taylor Greene did. Congressman Thomas Massey on Thursday was talking to CNN, and he said there's a number of Republicans in the House who are upset that what's been happening is that Republicans in Congress have simply been rubber stamping what the Trump administration wants to do. That was the terminology that he used. You have Elise Stefanik, who is openly at war with House Speaker Mike Johnson right now. Nancy Mace appears to be ready to leave. And there is, again, reportedly, according to the Politico report, that there could be a number of Republicans who are ready to leave in the middle of their terms. And David, I didn't have this on our show sheet, but I wanted to check in and see if you'd seen any of that and if you got that vibe as well.
Yes, it's happening. It's real, and more GOP resignations will happen than Democrat resignations. But one caveat to that: many of these resignations are typically in Republican safe spots and safe places. So this idea that when you see a big number, like, oh no, all of these Republicans are resigning. Okay, yeah, but are they in swing districts? You know, and there are going to be a few, but I don't think it will be as catastrophic as the number suggests. Having said that, I think the larger issue, Dan Andros, is that there are Republicans that are seeing the writing on the wall in the midterms and are jumping ship right now. And I think that's way premature, especially as it relates to what we just talked about, which is Q1 and Q2. And let's see where we're at in July.
Well, let's talk a little bit about Trump's health to finish off this episode of the podcast. And I'm always reticent to talk about, someone else's health because none of us are doctors here, and none of us are going to play doctor right now. So we're not going to try to diagnose anything, or we're not going to try and read tea leaves on health. But I do think the conversation about President Trump's health is apropos, especially when you consider how much controversy there was about how the media ignored President Biden's health and his cognitive and his physical decline during his 4 years in office. And during this week, we saw, and I'd be very interested to get your take on whether we actually saw President Trump fall asleep or doze off, or whether he was just resting his eyes during a long cabinet meeting and then during a news conference with the presidents of Congo and Rwanda. But it garnered a lot of attention, especially in light. I mean, I've heard Trump critics, say, listen, the president called Joe Biden Sleepy Joe during his administration, and now it's looking like he's dozing off at times. And listen, the president's 79 years old, and I'm not gonna cabinet meetings are boring. I'll say that first of all, just to kind of put it out there. But the White House on Monday also released results of an MRI the president underwent at Walter Reed back in October. It was his second checkup of the year. They've declared the 79-year-old president in excellent health. They said the MRI was a routine procedure. And Dan, the White House is railing against what they say is hypocrisy by the same news organizations that are pressing them on Trump's health because they ignored Biden's health for most of his administration. And of course, you have the opposite side of that as well. Well, you didn't want us to ignore President's health, so now we're not. How do you think the media is handling these questions about President Trump's health?
I don't really care if they ask about it, because that's what they should have been doing in the first place and didn't do the last time. So it doesn't bother me. I did watch the clips of the cabinet meeting, and you're 100% right, John. I mean, those things, Trump is essentially all of us in that cabinet meeting with the eyelids being heavy. I mean, it was tedious. But like, he was still engaged for the most part, at least in the clips I saw. Like, it was hard to say if he was actually asleep or like just looking down. At notes or something like that, because a couple of them were really brief, but he might have been a little tired of that one, and it is kind of ironic if he's fallen asleep at these things. But I think the key difference is Trump does not seem to have the problems that Biden did. If he's tired, he's tired. He's 79 years old, like he said. But the difference was Biden didn't seem like he could string a thought together at times. Yeah. And a lot of the time, and in the debate, we all saw that. And I don't think we're seeing that with Trump. Even if he is a little sleepy in a meeting or two.
Yeah, this is a guy that just held a 3-hour cabinet meeting. Okay, and what was this? The ninth one of the year so far. I feel like I said, it's a reality show, right? It's a season 2, episode 9 of the cabinet, and season two being the second term with Trump administration. This was episode 9. Sleepy Don, maybe they can call it. I don't know. Yeah, look, was he falling asleep? I think he was probably falling asleep a little bit, but wouldn't you? We've been talking about. But look, to me, it's interesting because Trump is so authentic to the point where he'll even fall asleep at his own cabinet meeting. He doesn't even care about any of this. And the reason he doesn't care is okay, tell me something I want to know. And if you're going to just bloviate, then I'm going to take a couple of winks here. It's what he is. I remember back in the day, the whole big deal was made about George H.W. Bush looking at his watch during the debate, and wondering when he was going to get out of here. And now we're having this. So, look, bottom line is, it's really hypocritical of the media to question Trump's health at this point. I don't really understand it. The guy makes the Energizer Bunny look weak. We would want to 100% have the amount of energy that President Trump has. I
just want to add to that, because it's a good point, David, that another difference here is that Trump has been relentlessly meeting with people and holding these conferences. Biden would be gone for weeks at a time, from the public view, essentially, and not doing anything, and then show up and still be falling asleep. Like, Trump's been busy. He's actually been doing stuff and keeping up a presidential schedule that we're more used to from past presidents. And I think that was another criticism of the Biden administration, is just like, what is he doing? Like, is he just having, some Werther's Original there on the beach under his, people didn't know what he was doing. Like, Trump is at least out there, and he's doing these cabinet meetings. He's having these foreign dignitaries come in and meet with them, and he's doing it a lot. So big difference.
I think he had one cabinet meeting a year or something, or maybe two. And I remember the last one was run by Jill Biden. So, I mean, come on, the whole thing's ridiculous to me.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's indisputable that this president has been far more out there in terms of engaging with the media, in terms of events on the public calendar. I think questions are fair. It's fair to ask questions. It's certainly the media's responsibility, the journalist's responsibility to do that, especially for a 79-year-old president.
Yeah.
But at the same time, there is clearly a difference between what we're seeing from President Trump and President Biden.
Yeah, I will say it was funny to see Marco Rubio complimenting Trump and just lauding him, and Trump going like this.
He's just like, okay.
Yeah, even the compliments are starting to tire him out a little bit.
They don't excite him anymore, yeah.
I was looking for drool. I didn't see drool, though. So.
Well, I think the drool is a good place to leave it here for this week. So for David Brody, Dan Andros, thanks everyone for listening and watching at Navigating Trump 2.0.
All right, John.
Thanks, guys.